when I used to give this, I've been giving this presentation and evolving it. Literally, I think the first time we gave this presentation was, and when I first gave it, it was all in person. We didn't have this kind of technology that you have now. But people were like, oh man, it was so controversial. You know, what do you mean cardio is not effective at helping you lose fat? That's crazy. And then in 2013, 2014 and on, people just kind of were more aware. And now it's more as people are very aware. They're like, well, I know it doesn't work. And now it's more as just kind of like, why? Why doesn't it work? So we'll get rolling here. And when we look at the human specimen, and we'll just take sports as an example, and we look at athletes, the athletes that tend to be the most aerobically active tend to have the highest body fat percentages. So I always look at two extremes. Your elite marathon runner with very high body fat percentages compared to, say, your sprinter who does very little low intensity steady state cardio, but tends to have very low body fat levels. You can look at some other athletes such as gymnasts. Nowadays, you can look at some elite CrossFit athletes, and you're going to find all very low amounts of low intensity steady state, or what we call cardio, and very low body fat percentages. So I always like to kind of use that analogy in starting the presentation. So I mentioned that we started to do this presentation in 2012. And even the studies are old as dirt. There's studies dating back into the 70s that just show that exercise as a modality to lose fat. So it's very, very important that we make that differentiation. But exercise as a modality to lose fat is fairly highly ineffective when looking at just exercise alone. And the studies are so common on that the Eat to Perform certification. Eric and I took it a couple years ago, or maybe a year ago, and I found it kind of tickling to see that they had quoted one of the studies dating back into, I think it was the early 80s, that just showed once again that was the case. So I kind of wanted to look at why and how can we explain this to people and show them, okay, well, what is effective? Because exercise is effective for so many things. I mean, the list is very, very long. So again, we're just talking about for fat loss in today's presentation. So please don't go to your doctor or primary care physician and tell them that RZ1 Nutrition is telling you not to work out or not to do cardio. But we know your time is valuable, and we're going to optimize that time. So let's look at energy dynamics and where does our energy go? Okay, so we expend so many units of energy or so many calories in a day. Where does it go? So the vast majority of it goes to our lungs, our organs, to support bodily functions. That's called our resting metabolic rate. Okay, so just to sustain life. The second largest portion of energy goes to non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is just when you're watching the kids, if you're a personal trainer, when you're training, if whatever it is that you do for a living. Okay, so you're not sleeping, you're not in the resting state, but you're not in the gym working out. So that's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you work 8 to 10 hours a day, then you would have 8 to 10 hours a day of NEAT. So that's why it makes up the second most amount of activity energy expenditure. And then you have the thermogenic effect of food. There's actually an energy cost when you eat food to digest that food, particularly protein. It takes a decent amount of energy to break down and digest. And then at the top, tends to be the least amount of energy that we expend is in exercise. And that kind of makes sense. If you're working out an hour a day, that's 1/24th of your day. So the remaining 23 hours, this is how you're expending energy, okay? So then we want to look at hormones and metabolism. So what effect, if any, do hormones have on our metabolism, or more in essence, our heart rate? So we have our catecholamines, that's norepinephrine, epinephrine, okay, and those are more sympathetic nervous system type hormones, so they kind of rile us up, and they will increase heart rate, okay, rapid heart rate. And then epinephrine, also called adrenaline, so increases anabolic hormones. And muscle preservation and fat loss tend to occur when these hormones are present in high amounts. Okay, so norepinephrine, epinephrine, collectively are catecholamines, and then adrenaline, which again is part of that. They tend to be very muscle protecting and very heart rate inducing, or increasing of the heart rate. You also have another hormone that's not on your slide here, cortisol. Cortisol, despite its bad reputation, does many, many very, very good things in the body. However, in an abundance of cortisol can lead to some not so great things from a fat loss perspective. Okay, so generally we want to keep cortisol in its normal ranges, and if at all possible, if we can increase adrenaline, catecholamines, that would definitely be a good thing if fat loss were our goal. All right, so I want to get into cardiovascular adaptations, and this is where some of the big aha moments come into play when we talk about cardiovascular training. So I'm going to get through these next couple slides and then open it up for questions. But the main adaptation to stressing the heart repetitively is a lower resting heart rate. So if you want to live a long, healthy, and fruitful life, then you want a lower than average resting heart rate. You don't want your heart working as hard, okay? If you ever notice, very large dogs tend to live longer than very small dogs, or if you look at the animal spectrum in general, small organism with very rapid heart rates, they tend to have very short lifespans. And cardiovascular disease is our #1 killer. Okay, so stresses to the heart is our #1 killer, right behind cancer, stroke, and so forth. So a lower resting heart rate just means that our heart isn't working as hard, and that is one of the million reasons why we want to do cardiovascular activity, because of that adaptation. The more cardio we do, the lower our resting heart rate is going to be the remaining, say, 23 hours of the day, okay? So the more efficient the heart is, the less energy is expended per 24-hour period, okay? So again, if I have a very efficient heart, this here, my resting metabolic rate and my NEAT all tend to decrease, okay? Because my heart doesn't have to work as hard. So it makes sense. A good analogy would be if you have a car that has great fuel economy, it's going to run a lot longer than a car, or go through a lot less gas than a car with horrible fuel economy, okay? So pretty self-explanatory there. Losing body weight itself will increase the heart's VO2 max, okay? So just losing weight and my heart doesn't have to work as hard. And again, that kind of makes sense. When I first learned that, I was like, well, how is that? But that makes sense. If I go from a 200-pound male to a 180-pound male, I'm carting around 20 pounds less per step. If I take 20,000 steps a day, that's 20,000 times 20 pounds. It's literally tons of weight that I'm not carrying around and carting around per day. So that makes sense. The heart is working a lot less if my body weight is lower, okay? Also, as we exercise and we strengthen our glutes and hamstrings, our cardiovascular efficiency increases as well. So if I have strong glutes, strong hamstrings, as most exercising individuals do, then we have better cardiorespiratory fitness and cardiovascular endurance, just because it's easier, because we're stronger, to take those steps. We don't have to exert as much energy. And all of this goes into, with the lower resting heart rate, what the main cause of that is an increased stroke volume. Your stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped from one ventricle of the heart with each beat, okay? So I also call that cardiovascular efficiency. So if my heart can be, per beat, can pump a ton of blood through my circulatory system, then it doesn't have to beat as much, okay? So the bottom line of the conversation is, the lower our resting heart rate is, the better our cardiorespiratory fitness and cardiovascular efficiency is, the longer we're gonna live, the less stress we're gonna have on our heart, and the better off we're gonna be just as human beings in general. The healthier we're gonna be, the longer we're gonna live, okay? And the less apt we'll be to fall victim to cardiovascular disease, all right? So let's look at some of the math of cardiovascular efficiency, all right? So say I'm an in-shape person, and by the way, for this entire kind of symposium and this entire topic that we're talking about, including the study I showed you earlier, so including this study here, these are in trained individuals. Okay, so these are individuals who exercise on average cardiovascularly 3 times a week. Okay, so that's an important factor. All right, so going back to the math of cardiovascular efficiency. Increased cardiovascular efficiency, we already talked about, greatly increases life expectancy because the heart is beating less and doing less work. All right, so it's more powerful. So if you think a person with a resting heart rate of 75, which would be considered average, that isn't, morbidly out of shape, but it's not necessarily very in shape, but would be around 75 beats per minute, okay? So this person's little heart at 75 beats per minute is gonna be 39,420,000 times per year. Now, if you look at, I just did my resting heart rate, okay? We did it this morning and it was 60. So my heart is going to be 31,536,000 times this year, okay? At a resting heart rate of 60. So the person with the 75 beats per minute is gonna be 7,884,000 times more than me. So what's the point? Why am I going over all this? Who's going to burn more calories? Well, obviously this guy or gal whose heart is beating 7,884,000 times more than me is going to burn much, much more calories than me at the resting heart rate of 60, okay? Now, because their heart is working harder, okay? And that just is what it is. Based off just that fact alone, I may live to be a little bit longer, or my heart, I should say, might be a little bit more healthier because it's just working less, it's stressed less, all right? When we combine this with low-calorie dieting, we tend to get an even lower heart rate. And that makes sense. The studies are conclusive on that because low-calorie dieting is going to decrease your body weight, which is going to decrease your resting heart rate. So that kind of makes sense. So what else goes on here at that lower resting heart rate? Well, we already explained that. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis is going to go way down, okay, because we're more efficient. And our resting metabolic rate, because our heart is beating less often, is going to go down. Also, because we have an efficient heart, say that when we first started out, when we first started doing cardio, let's just pretend it was 3 months ago. But then our heart's like, what are you doing to me? I mean, it's working, you're sweating, you're 170 beats per minute, or 90% of maximal heart rate, you're burning a ton of calories. But then your heart, being the strongest muscle in your body, once it's lowered and increased that stroke volume, now it's maybe at 130, okay? So basically, an in-shape heart is going to burn less calories during exercise, less calories throughout the day, okay? And less calories at work, all right? Because it's more efficient. Those are all good things for longevity, bad things for fat loss, okay? Which kind of makes it moot for fat loss. So what happens when an in-shape individual, Okay, so someone who's been doing some cardio, who has a good resting heart rate for a heart, what happens when they look at their Fitbit and they say, oh man, I just burned 700 calories, I can go eat that Cinnabon. Or more so, I ate that Cinnabon last night, so I just burned 700 calories, I'm even Steven. Why doesn't it work that way? Okay, well, it doesn't work that way because this is what has happened. Okay, yes, in exercise, you will burn that 700 calories. So the adaptation of what we just talked about is to lower, and this is a fictitious example, but let's say that this person's BMR is 1,800 calories. So that's just going to now go down 700 calories. So you're going to burn coincidentally less calories the rest of the day. We did some minor cardiovascular activity today. We walked about 4 or 5 miles. And afterwards, I already saw the impact of that. In my non-exercise activity thermogenesis, I felt like taking a nap. Okay, and that was just my body with that lower resting heart rate. It was saying, hey, you increased my heart rate really for no apparent reason because my heart rate's already pretty low, resting heart rate. So what I'm going to do the rest of the day is I'm just going to lower it to combat that caloric expenditure. Okay, all right, so we had some good math here. We talked about cardiovascular efficiency. I want to see if I can unmute you guys, see if there's any questions. And then I'm going to go over some recommendations as far as what I might recommend to kind of try to combat this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute. So if there's any questions from anyone out there, now would be the time. I have y'all unmuted. All right, questions going once.
Hey, Jesse.
Yes.
Jesse, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool. This is my first time being on here. But my question was, as I'm driving, and I am watching the road, I promise, but I wanted to ask, I kind of had it break up during the conversation when you said, okay, it's 700 calories. Can you go back and then do the cardio, and that will subject yourself to that calorie loss, or no?
Sure. Okay. So in the apparent healthy adult who is in shape, they're not brand new to working out, no, because what will happen, and I know you're driving, you can't see my slides, but what will happen is your resting metabolic rate and your non-exercise activity thermogenesis will all go down accordingly with that 700 calories. Okay, and so in other words, just stress your heart to burn 700 calories. So the adaptation to that is going to be that your body is going to burn 700 calories less than it normally would the rest of the day. And again, that's in an individual, say like yourself, who's been working out, who has a healthy resting heart rate, and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on. Are there any other questions before we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of piggybacking off that. You say that your RMR kind of counter reacts to the amount of calories you burn. So is there like a cap to the amount of calories you can burn in a day?
That's a good question. The RMR is, all good questions. The RMR is most directly related to, well, heart rate. And your total caloric expenditure is most directly related to heart rate. So the more in shape you are, the less calories that you need because the lower your resting heart rate. And then again, the studies are very conclusive on that as well, as far as the less we eat, the longer we tend to live. And the second to heart rate would be body weight, which is the reason for heart rate, okay? So your body weight tends to be the biggest driver of your metabolism. A lot of people say, well, muscle is more metabolically active and so forth. Muscle contributes to weight. So if I am 170 pounds and I gain 10 pounds of muscle, my metabolism is going to go up quite a bit because I got to now cart around 10 pounds times 10,000 steps times, every squat I do is now 10 pounds greater from that 10 pounds of muscle. But it really doesn't really matter if that is fat or muscle, just a fat loss perspective. Muscle is a tiny bit more metabolically active than fat, but not nearly as much that we used to think. So no, there's not necessarily a cap in that your body weight is what it is. As your body weight declines, your energy expenditure is going to decline as your heart rate lowers and so forth. There's some examples like, Olympic athletes, Michael Phelps, the guy eats 10,000 calories a day because he's literally exercising 8 to 10 hours a day. He has no heat. His non-exercise activity thermogenesis is training. Where most of us aren't at that level and, recovering at his level and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about, Chris, did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Gotcha. So yeah, there really isn't a cap on that that's really not body weight or heart rate driven. So now we're going to go back to those hormones, and we're going to talk about, okay, is there any fat loss benefit to cardio whatsoever? Well, the more in shape we get, the less the benefit, but we're going to talk about some hormonal things that we can do that isn't going to be the cure-all, end-all, but will help. And if you notice, have you ever noticed that after some workouts, dude, you're not going to bed no matter what? Those are the workouts that stimulate epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, testosterone, okay? Basically, what's going to stimulate those catecholamines is your body needs to think that there's an imminent threat, okay? If I come into your home with a gun, your heart rate's going to go up so much, you're not sleeping that night. You are just going to be in shock, okay? Or if you're a police officer and you just got out of a gunfight, you're not sleeping that night. Your heart rate is going to be so elevated from those catecholamines, okay? Whereas what doesn't really release much catecholamines is normal cardio, okay? If you're on elliptical, just trooning along, running, trooning along. That's why after typically normal cardio, your heart rate kind of lowers and you want to just you want to zonk out. So let's talk about our RZ1 recommendations to what, if anything, can we do to use exercise as a fat loss aid, okay? And there's not a whole lot, but there are a few things that we can kind of do to buck the system here, all right? So we've already talked about cardiovascular efficiency and things of that nature. So, well, one, we cannot lose body weight. Now, read what I have there. If you're trying to lose fat, we're going to lose body weight. That's going to lower our resting heart rate. It's going to improve our cardiovascular efficiency. But one thing that you can do is say that you go from 200 to 180. Well, you can combat that by putting that 20 pounds in, say, form of a vest. That may or may not be workable depending on what kind of job you do. But if you go ahead and make yourself that 200-pound person, your heart is going to have to work just as hard as it was before to cart you around, basically. So at a minimum, you can wear a vest during workouts, okay? Or if you insist on doing cardio for one of the other millions of reasons of why cardio is good for you, and you're looking to maybe derive a tiny bit of fat loss benefit from it, wear the vest during your cardio, okay? So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing, which would be more preferential, okay, would be, the second thing that'd be more preferential would be to do the types of movements that are going to elicit the catecholamine response. So large muscle mass engagement. And this is what CrossFit is really, really good for, is the typical WOD that people do in CrossFit, or that we do in CrossFit. I mean, it's, it might be lighter weight, but it's squats, deadlifts, higher reps, and the heart rate is well close to 90% of maximal heart rate, and you're engaging large muscle mass. So your body doesn't know what's going on. Your body thinks, okay, maybe I'm fighting a bear right now. Okay, maybe I'm fighting for my life. So you tend to get that catecholamine response which leads to a better EPOC or post-exercise oxygen consumption. A third thing is when estimating heart rate using the Cavornan formula that you have here in bullet point 3, as opposed to the regular heart rate formula. What I like about the Cavornan formula is it takes resting heart rate into account. So if you have a very good resting heart rate, say like 55 or 60 or something like that, the Cavornan formula takes that lower resting heart rate into account in doing your cardiovascular activity. So the studies have found that 85 to 90% of maximal heart rate, which is very, very tough, especially if you're using the Cavornan formula. Getting to that, you might only be able to sustain it for literally a second or two, but that is going to be optimal at releasing catecholamines to get more bang for your fat loss buck during your cardiovascular activities. So I normally would recommend like a 10-minute warm-up, 10 peaks at 90% with as much rest as you need between peaks. So 10 of those, 10 peaks, 10 valleys, and then maybe a 20-minute cool down. And then, of course, prioritizing rest will greatly help as far as reducing cortisol and things of that nature. We didn't touch on it too much, but long, slow, steady state cardio tends to, because catecholamines are low, tends to increase cortisol a little bit. Normally not to a gigantic measurable degree, but to a degree nonetheless. All right, let's see, how do we unmute here? And we're gonna go into questions, and then if there's no questions, we will go ahead and wrap this up. So any questions from anyone out there? All right, rock and roll. This is a recorded seminar. If you did not get to see the slides were a big part of this seminar. So go ahead and log into the recording and you guys can see the slides and you guys will be good to go. All right, hope everyone has a great night. Thanks for joining and we are wrapped up.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right.
Thank you.
What is under your chin?
Chica bear.